The Terran fleet slowly moved away from Earth's orbit, its ships glinting like polished steel under the light of a distant sun. Hundreds of warships, massive cruisers, stealth corvettes, and scout frigates moved with precision, forming formations that no enemy could anticipate. The crews aboard were calm, disciplined, and confident, trained for decades to respond to any threat. Each pilot, each engineer, each officer understood the stakes. The galaxy had watched humanity grow, underestimated them, and mocked their defenses, believing that Earth was weak, scattered, and disorganized. The Terran fleet was about to prove them wrong. Far across the void, alien command centers buzzed with activity. Screens flickered with warnings, alarms screamed frantic messages, and the air was filled with confidence bordering on arrogance. The aliens believed that humans were predictable. They assumed the fleet would react slowly, make mistakes, and fall into chaos. They assumed Earth had nothing beyond its surface defenses, that the Terrans were unprepared for an organized confrontation in open space. Alien commanders laughed among themselves, confident that victory would come easily, that these humans would break under the weight of an overwhelming assault. But the Terran fleet was different. It was not only massive, but it was organized in ways that the enemy could not anticipate. Formations shifted like living patterns, every ship moving in exact coordination with others. Sensors and scanners stretched across thousands of kilometers, detecting even the smallest interference, the faintest trace of movement. Pilots relied on instincts honed over decades. Engineers monitored every pulse of energy, every shield fluctuation. And in the center, the command ships orchestrated a symphony of control. Every ship knew its role. Every maneuver had a purpose. Every action, even silence, carried intent. As the Terran fleet moved, strange readings began appearing on alien scanners. Ships seemed to vanish into empty space, only to reappear where none should exist. Engines died without warning, systems shut down without attack. Communication lines glitched, creating confusion among the alien crews. Panic began to creep into the command centers that had only moments before been full of arrogance. Officers stared at screens they did not understand, monitors that reported impossible readings, and navigation arrays that gave contradictory data. The aliens laughed initially, believing these anomalies were glitches easily ignored. But doubt began to grow in their hearts. Something was wrong, something they had not prepared for. In the lead command ship of the Terran fleet, Captain Elias Duran watched the galaxy through reinforced viewports. He did not need to shout orders. The crew knew their roles, moving as one entity, silent and efficient. All units, maintain formation Delta 7. Sensors active. Prepare for first engagement protocols, he said calmly, voice even and precise. There was no fear, no haste, no panic. Every officer nodded, their eyes sharp, hands steady. The Terran fleet did not rush blindly into battle. They did not act recklessly. They moved with patience, understanding that their control over the battlefield would be their greatest weapon. The alien fleets continued forward, unaware of the invisible traps waiting for them. Minefields were not visible to standard sensors. Stealth corvettes hovered in gravitational blind spots, invisible, ready to strike at critical moments. Subtle electromagnetic pulses disabled engines and weapons without a single shot being fired. The aliens' overconfidence made them slow to react. Their arrogance made them predictable. Every move they made had been anticipated, every formation accounted for. The Terrans were silent predators, invisible until the moment of impact. Alien commanders tried to issue orders, but confusion reigned. "Weapons fire on Grid 7, one shouted. No response. Systems failing, another cried. Pilots struggled as engines shut down mid-flight. Sensors flickered, showing phantom ships, distortions in space that did not exist. The more they struggled, the more trapped they became. The Terran fleet moved with an almost supernatural coordination, striking without firing conventional weapons, disabling systems silently, efficiently, and with absolute precision. Fear began to gnaw at the bravest of the alien officers. They had assumed humans were weak, slow, and reactive. They were learning, too late, that humans had patience, foresight, and discipline beyond comprehension. In the alien fleet, panic spread quickly. Officers and crews argued over failed systems. Commanders shouted over static, ordering attacks that never came. Junior officers trembled, some crying silently at consoles that refused to obey. Engineers cursed as their repairs failed instantly. The Terrans had disabled their fleets without engaging in open combat. Every assumption about human weakness had been destroyed. Confidence was replaced with fear. Pride was replaced with despair. And the aliens still did not fully understand the scale of what was happening. From the Terran perspective, the battle had not yet fully begun. Captain Duran observed the enemy formations, noting the subtle errors caused by human interference. He did not need to shout orders. He simply issued calm, precise adjustments, and the fleet responded perfectly. A corvette glided silently into a blind spot, sending a localized pulse that disrupted the engines of half a dozen alien cruisers. Not a shot was fired, not a life unnecessarily taken, yet the aliens' confidence shattered. Another formation moved to intercept the enemy, creating phantom threats that forced the aliens to split and weaken their numbers. Every step the Terrans took was deliberate, controlled, and deadly. The first collisions were subtle, almost invisible. Alien ships stumbled into disabled engines, drifting helplessly. Weapon arrays misfired. Shielding systems collapsed at crucial moments. No human ship was damaged. The Terrans had anticipated every move, every attempt to escape or counterattack. Alien pilots screamed as controls failed. Ships spun out of control, and fleets fragmented under invisible pressure. Humanity had not yet engaged directly in combat, and already the enemy was broken. Across the galaxy, observers began to take notice. Reports of anomalies in the alien fleets spread quickly. "What are humans doing?" some whispered in disbelief. "Their ships move without striking, yet the enemy collapses." Confusion and awe rippled through civilizations that had long underestimated humanity. They watched as a fleet considered untouchable faltered under invisible forces, struck not with firepower, but with intelligence, foresight, and patience. The Terran fleet demonstrated that discipline and control could achieve what brute force could not. As the alien commanders tried to regroup, the Terrans moved silently to surround and anticipate them. Every exit route had been accounted for. Every weak point exploited without direct confrontation. Subtle disruptions in gravity, magnetic fields, and energy flows created chaos for the aliens. Invisible to their eyes but devastating in effect. Ships were trapped, engines disabled, and crews paralyzed in fear. The first signs of fear began to turn into full-blown panic. Confidence shattered, pride crumbled, and still, the humans remained calm, precise, and patient. The first shots of the battle were yet to be fired. Yet already the aliens knew they had been outmaneuvered. They had assumed weakness, underestimated humans, and trespassed into territory they could not control. Every failure of their systems, every misstep in coordination, every unanticipated error forced them into despair. For the first time, the invaders realized they were no longer in control. Humanity had created a battlefield where the enemy's arrogance was their undoing, their trespass their fatal mistake. Captain Duran looked over the fleet one final time before engagement. His voice was calm, almost serene. "Prepare for contact. Remember your training. Move with precision. Patience will win this battle." No one needed further instructions. The Terran fleet had learned one lesson more than their enemies. The first strike was not always about weapons or destruction. It was about control, observation, patience, and precision. Humanity would strike when necessary, and when it did, it would be decisive. In the alien fleet, the first cracks of fear became impossible to hide. Ships faltered, pilots panicked, and crews whispered prayers. The arrogance that had filled their minds at the start of the deployment was gone, replaced with the cold, crushing reality that they had misjudged humanity. A species they had assumed weak, scattered, and slow had outmaneuvered them without even a single direct shot. The Terrans were not loud. They were not violent. They were precise, patient, and unstoppable. By the time the first actual collision occurred, the alien fleets were already fractured. Engines failed mid-maneuver. Weapons misfired. Ships that should have defended others collided with invisible forces, drifting helplessly. Panic reigned. Crew members screamed. Commanders shouted orders that could not be obeyed. Humanity struck silently, invisibly, and lethally. The first engagement did not require chaos. It required foresight, discipline, and control. And it worked flawlessly. As the sun shone across the Terran fleet, the ships glinted in calculated formations, a testament to the intelligence and discipline of humanity. For the first time in centuries, an alien fleet realized it had trespassed into a force it could not challenge. The Terrans did not need fire to destroy confidence, despair to break arrogance, or chaos to scatter pride. Patience, foresight, and precision had done it all. The galaxy would remember this day, not for explosions, not for victory, but for the lesson humanity had taught. Underestimate us, trespass against us, and you will fall silently, inevitably, and completely. And in that calm, tense moment, before full combat erupted, the aliens finally understood. Humanity was not just strong. Humanity was not just disciplined. Humanity was patient, precise, intelligent, and unstoppable. Every ship, every crew member, every strike carried intent. The Terran fleet had deployed, and those who believed themselves untouchable were already falling, one silent, calculated, and inevitable step at a time. The alien fleets, still believing in their own superiority, pressed deeper into human space. They assumed the Terran fleet would respond slowly, that Earth's defenses would be scattered and uncoordinated. They did not realize that the humans had been preparing for this moment for decades. Every ship, every crew member, every officer knew the strategies, countermeasures, and contingencies. What the aliens saw as calm patience was, in fact, the quiet before a storm meticulously calculated to break their arrogance and pride. Sensors aboard alien vessels began to flicker, showing phantom readings that should not have existed. Some ships appeared on the display in multiple locations at once. Engines cut out for no reason. Weapons froze mid-charge. Shields collapsed without attack. Panic crept into the alien crews. Officers shouted orders that no one could obey. Pilots struggled with failing thrusters, drifting helplessly through space as alarms screamed in every corridor. Engineers worked frantically at consoles that would not respond. Fear replaced confidence. Pride crumbled. In the Terran fleet, Captain Elias Duran observed the chaos silently from the bridge of his flagship. His eyes scanned displays filled with the enemy's failing systems, misfiring weapons, and drifting ships. He did not shout. He did not panic. He simply issued calm, precise commands, and the fleet responded perfectly. A squadron of corvettes moved into gravitational blind spots, sending electromagnetic pulses that disabled engines without firing a shot. Another group created phantom decoys, forcing alien vessels to split and lose coordination. The humans had not yet fired their weapons, and yet the enemy was breaking apart, piece by piece. On one alien dreadnought, the admiral clutched the railing, his eyes wide in disbelief. What are they doing?" he whispered, voice trembling. Junior officers stared at screens that reported impossible anomalies, their hearts pounding. The fleet, considered untouchable, had lost its cohesion within minutes. Crew members who had faced countless battles now trembled with fear, unsure of what to do next. Every system failure, every misfire, every disruption brought them closer to despair. The humans were not only strong, they were patient, disciplined, and precise beyond imagination. The alien fleets tried to reorganize. Orders were shouted, weapons fired, engines roared. But every attempt was anticipated and countered. The Terrans had already calculated every possible maneuver. Invisible interference fields redirected ships into vulnerable positions. Stealth corvettes moved unseen into blind spots, ready to disable critical systems. Communication channels were disrupted, leaving commanders unable to coordinate. Panic became a tangible force, spreading through every vessel like a virus. Engineers wept silently at consoles they could not fix. Pilots screamed into voids that offered no answer. Meanwhile, the humans remained calm. Every action, every movement, every subtle disruption was carried out with precision and foresight. Ships shifted formations like living beings, anticipating the enemy's responses before they happened. It was not brute force that dominated this battle. It was intelligence, patience, and control. Every disabled weapon, every drifting cruiser, every failure of alien systems carried a lesson in discipline, a lesson in foresight, and a lesson in the consequences of arrogance. Humanity did not need chaos to win. They needed only precision and patience. Across the alien fleets, despair reached deeper. Junior officers whispered regrets they could not voice, questioning every choice that had led them into this situation. Engineers cursed their pride, realizing that their technology had been outmatched not by strength, but by understanding. Commanders trembled, shouting orders that would not be obeyed, watching helplessly as fleets split and drifted into chaos. Fear, shame, and awe consumed them. They had trespassed into human space, underestimated humans, and were now paying a price they could not escape. On the Terran flagship, Captain Terran issued a single calm command: prepare for controlled engagement. Only strike where necessary. Do not waste lives. Maintain precision. Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood the weight of restraint and responsibility. They were not only defending their home, they were teaching the galaxy a lesson. Arrogance and trespass would not go unpunished, but humans were not reckless. Every move carried moral weight as well as strategic impact. Alien fleets continued to struggle. Engines sputtered, shields failed, weapons misfired. Attempts at coordinated maneuvers collapsed. Ships collided silently, crews panicked, and fear spread like wildfire. Officers who had believed themselves untouchable now whispered apologies they could not make, regret they could not undo. The humans had demonstrated that true power did not lie in numbers, size, or aggression. It lay in patience, precision, and foresight. Humanity's discipline was their deadliest weapon. Subtlety became terror for the aliens. One cruiser, isolated from the others, suddenly found its systems paralyzed. Engines failed, weapons locked, communications cut. The crew screamed into silence, realizing there was no one to help them. Another vessel tried to flee, only to drift helplessly into a gravity distortion created by an unseen Terran ship. Panic and despair spread across the fleet like an uncontrollable storm. The humans had not yet even fired a single shot, yet the alien crews were broken, humiliated, and fearful. The galaxy, observing through distant stations and spy networks, began to understand the scale of humanity's control. A species once considered weak, scattered, and unprepared had outmaneuvered and disabled an entire fleet without open conflict. Fear rippled across alien civilizations. Reports of drifting ships, failing systems, and paralyzed crews spread quickly. Everywhere, observers whispered, humans are not weak. They are precise, disciplined, and unstoppable. Mixed with terror, humanity had redefined power. Inside the alien flagship, desperation peaked. The admiral, shaking with fear, tried to issue a retreat. Fall back. Regroup, he shouted. But systems failed, engines refused to respond, and the fleet had already been caught in invisible snares. Pilots panicked as ships spun helplessly. Junior officers tried to repair what could not be repaired. Crew members cried. The arrogance that had led them to invade human space evaporated, replaced with the stark reality of helplessness. The humans had struck silently, with intelligence, foresight, and moral restraint. And it had been enough. Captain Terran's voice cut through the calm of the Terran bridge. Monitor all sectors. Maintain formation. Prepare for engagement only when necessary. Observe, anticipate, and act with precision. His words were calm, almost serene, yet carried the weight of absolute authority. The Terran fleet had demonstrated the first principle of space warfare. Patience, precision, and foresight were more deadly than reckless aggression. Humans did not need chaos to win. They only needed control, intelligence, and discipline. Alien crews continued to collapse under the pressure. Communication arrays failed. Engines sputtered. Weapons remained paralyzed. Junior officers wept silently. Commanders cursed themselves for trespassing. Pride and confidence had turned to fear and despair. The invaders had learned, too late, that patience and precision were humanity's deadliest weapons. Even as the first engagement approached, they knew they were already defeated in ways they could not comprehend. The first collision would come not with fire, but with the invisible, unstoppable force of foresight and control. Alien ships drifted helplessly as the Terran fleet moved silently into position. Every maneuver, every formation, every subtle disruption was deliberate, measured, and precise. The humans were not reckless. They did not rush. They did not overcommit. They struck only when the effect would be total, the impact decisive, and the lesson unforgettable. The galaxy would remember this moment. Not for explosions, not for battles, not for deaths, but for the quiet, unstoppable precision of humanity. As the Terran fleet glided across the void, shining like silver ghosts under distant stars, the alien commanders realized the truth. They had trespassed. They had underestimated humans. They had ignored decades of warnings. And now, every ship, every crew, every command would feel the consequences. The humans did not need to fire a single shot to dominate, disable, and humiliate. They moved with control, foresight, patience, and moral clarity. The first engagement would only confirm what the aliens already knew. Humanity was unstoppable. And in the shadows of the alien fleet, doubt turned into fear, fear turned into despair, and despair settled into helplessness. They had believed themselves untouchable. They had trespassed into human space. And now, before the first true battle had even begun, they were already falling, caught by invisible forces they could not see, in a fight they could not hope to win, against a species that had mastered patience, precision, and moral power in ways they could not comprehend. The alien fleet was in chaos. Ships that should have defended each other were drifting apart. Engines cut, weapons frozen, communication dead. Panic gripped every officer, every pilot, every engineer. They had assumed humans would respond slowly, that Earth's defenses would be weak, that arrogance would overpower discipline. They were wrong. The humans had waited, silently, patiently, and now the consequences of trespassing were falling upon them with unstoppable force. The first few minutes of engagement had already shattered confidence, and the alien crews felt the crushing weight of helplessness. On one command bridge, the alien admiral slammed a clawed hand on the console. "Why are our engines failing? Why are our weapons offline?" he roared, voice trembling with panic and rage. Junior officers scrambled to answer, but there were no answers. Every system that could be repaired refused to respond. Every protocol failed. The humans had anticipated everything, predicted every maneuver, and neutralized the fleet before full combat had begun. The pride of centuries, the belief in invincibility, was gone. The alien officers stared at screens displaying phantom ships, impossible readings, and silent enemies moving with perfect control. Fear gnawed at their minds, growing with every passing second. Across the void, Terran corvettes slipped silently into blind spots, unseen, unnoticed. A single pulse from one ship disrupted an entire squadron of alien cruisers. Engines sputtered and shut down, shields collapsed and weapons misfired. Pilots screamed as they drifted helplessly, unable to control their ships. Engineers banged at consoles in disbelief, cursing their arrogance for assuming humans were weak. On every vessel, crews whispered desperate prayers, tried repairs that failed instantly, and trembled under the weight of fear. The Terrans had not even begun the real attack, and yet the aliens were falling apart from invisible pressure, precision, and discipline. Captain Elias Duran watched the chaos unfold through the main display on the flagship. His voice was calm, steady, and precise. Maintain formation, monitor all sectors, observe and anticipate, act only when necessary. His crew responded like a single organism. Ships shifted in perfect harmony, decoys moved to force enemy errors, stealth vessels disabled engines without firing a shot. Every move was deliberate, calculated, and morally precise. The humans did not destroy recklessly. They did not gloat or overreach. Every subtle action carried purpose, discipline, and restraint. In the alien ranks, panic became despair. Junior officers wept silently at failing consoles, realizing the arrogance that brought them here had led to their undoing. Engineers cursed themselves for assuming their technology was superior, for assuming humans would be predictable. Commanders shouted orders that could not be obeyed, watching their fleets fragment. Ships collided silently in the void, crews drifting helplessly, unable to maneuver. The humans had created a battlefield where patience, intelligence, and foresight were weapons stronger than lasers or missiles. The first strike had already been delivered, without a single conventional shot, and its impact was devastating. Subtle interference became terror. A cruiser attempted to escape, only to drift into a localized gravitational anomaly created by a hidden Terran ship. Systems failed mid-flight, weapons froze, shields collapsed. Pilots screamed as they spun helplessly through the void. Another vessel's engines died, leaving it stranded while stealth corvettes appeared from blind spots, silently monitoring, disabling, controlling. No human ship was exposed unnecessarily. No crew at risk beyond what was required. Every action was deliberate, every effect calculated, every alien failure a lesson in the consequences of arrogance and trespass. The galaxy beyond watched in awe and disbelief. Communications relayed images of alien fleets faltering, systems failing, and crews panicking. Observers whispered to one another, "Humans are not weak. They are precise, disciplined, and unstoppable." Across alien civilizations, disbelief and fear rippled through command centers. A species once considered minor had demonstrated control, patience, and intelligence beyond anything the galaxy had expected. The Terran fleet did not need explosions, fire, or chaos. Their presence, discipline, and foresight were enough to break the enemy. Within the alien flagship, despair reached its peak. The Admiral's claws trembled as he clutched the railing. "We were supposed to be untouchable, and yet, we are falling," he whispered, voice cracking. The officers around him could only stare, frozen. Junior officers panicked. Engineers wept quietly. Pilots drifted helplessly, trying to regain control of ships that refused to respond. The aliens had believed in their superiority, in the invincibility of their technology, and in the weakness of humans. They were now learning the brutal truth. Their arrogance had been fatal. The humans, calm and composed, continued their silent operations. Stealth ships monitored every movement. Subtle pulses disabled systems without alerting crews. Decoy ships forced aliens to scatter. Corvettes created phantom threats that split formations and left ships isolated. No shot had yet been fired directly, but the damage to morale, cohesion, and confidence was total. Fear spread faster than any missile. The aliens had trespassed, underestimated, and ignored warnings, and now their pride was destroyed. Captain Terran walked across the bridge, observing his crew working seamlessly. "Do not underestimate patience. Do not overreach. Observe and act with precision," he said softly. Every officer nodded. Every pilot and engineer understood the importance of control, discipline, and foresight. Humanity did not need to destroy recklessly. They only needed to disable, control, and teach the galaxy that trespass and arrogance carried consequences far beyond imagination. Alien ships drifted helplessly, crew members panicked, and chaos reigned. Engines sputtered, shields failed, weapons froze, and communication remained dead. Officers screamed into silence. Junior officers whispered prayers. Engineers cursed. The first strike had been subtle, nearly invisible, yet the consequences were catastrophic. Humanity had struck not with fire or rage, but with intelligence, foresight, patience, and moral control. The aliens were broken before full combat had begun. Across distant observation posts, civilizations watched in stunned silence. Reports of fleets faltering without shots being fired spread quickly. Ships drifting, engines failing, weapons locked, and crews panicking. Whispers of awe and fear echoed. Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable. The galaxy was learning the first lesson about humanity's true power. Arrogance, trespass, and underestimation were fatal mistakes. Humanity had weaponized patience, intelligence, and moral discipline to devastating effect. The alien admiral, trembling, tried one last desperate command. Regroup. Retreat. Do something. His voice broke as he realized nothing could be done. Ships would not respond. Engines refused. Weapons remained paralyzed. The crews were helpless. Panic became despair. Shame replaced pride. Confidence turned to fear. The humans had anticipated every possible action, every possible maneuver. Every failure of the alien fleet was deliberate, controlled, and orchestrated by minds that had prepared for centuries. Captain Terran watched silently. Hold position. Maintain formation. Observe. Wait for the correct moment to engage. Calm, precise, disciplined. Every crew member understood the weight of restraint, responsibility, and moral clarity. The Terran fleet had not yet unleashed its full power. Yet the first engagement had already destroyed the arrogance of an entire enemy fleet. Patience, precision, and foresight had become the deadliest weapons in the galaxy. Alien crews were collapsing under invisible pressure. Pilots spun helplessly. Weapons froze. Shields collapsed. Engineers wept at failed consoles. Officers shouted orders that could not be obeyed. The invaders realized, finally, that they had misjudged humanity, underestimated them, and trespassed into territory they could not control. The humans had demonstrated that power did not require chaos or aggression. It required patience, intelligence, foresight, and moral discipline. And as the first subtle collisions occurred, ships drifting into controlled positions, engines failing at critical moments, weapons paralyzed, the aliens understood the truth. They had walked into a trap not built with fire or explosions, but with precision, patience, and discipline. Every assumption about human weakness was wrong. Every arrogance they had relied on was shattered. Humanity had struck silently, lethally, and morally. The first engagement was over before it had begun, and already the invaders were broken, humiliated, and afraid. The galaxy would remember this moment, not as a battle of explosions, but as the day humanity demonstrated that patience, foresight, and moral control were deadlier than any weapon. The aliens had trespassed, underestimated, and ignored warnings. Humanity had anticipated every move. They had struck, not with noise, not with chaos, but with precision, discipline, and moral clarity that left the invaders powerless, terrified, and humiliated. And still, the humans remained calm, disciplined, and ready, knowing that true victory lay not in destruction, but in control, foresight, and preparation. The alien fleets, already fractured and confused, tried to regain control, but the humans anticipated every desperate maneuver. Every attempt to reorganize was predicted, countered, and neutralized. Ships that should have linked formations drifted helplessly into invisible traps. Engines sputtered, weapons froze, and shields collapsed at critical moments. The invaders had come with arrogance in their hearts and pride in their fleets, believing they could challenge humanity and emerge victorious. Now, all that remained of their confidence was fear, and it spread like wildfire through every vessel. On one alien cruiser, a junior officer stared at failing monitors, hands shaking, eyes wide. "Sir, systems are down. All engines offline. Weapons unresponsive," he whispered, voice trembling. The commander, a veteran who had led hundreds of battles, slammed his clawed fist against the console. "Impossible! We should still have control." He had trained for decades to overcome every conceivable threat, yet nothing could counter the precision, foresight, and discipline of the humans. His pride, once unshakable, had been shattered. Around him, officers whispered prayers they had not spoken since they were young. Panic gnawed at every heart. Across the void, Terran corvettes moved silently, creating subtle but devastating disruptions. Electromagnetic pulses drained energy from alien engines. Stealth ships appeared in blind spots, unseen to monitor and disable. Decoy vessels moved to force enemy errors, splitting formations and isolating ships. Not a single human ship had fired a shot yet, and still the alien fleets were falling apart. Systems failed, crews panicked, and commanders despaired. Humanity's power lay not in firepower, but in patience, foresight, and moral precision. Every movement of the Terran fleet carried intent, teaching the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Captain Elias Duran observed the alien chaos through the bridge displays. His eyes scanned every anomaly, every failing system, every drifting ship. He did not shout orders. His crew knew their roles. Every officer, engineer, and pilot responded seamlessly, moving as one organism. Monitor all sectors. Maintain formation Delta 9. Observe and anticipate. Only engage when necessary, he said, voice calm and steady. Discipline, foresight, and moral clarity guided every action. Humanity had prepared for centuries for this moment, and now the consequences of alien arrogance were becoming painfully clear. The first collisions, subtle but devastating, occurred without sound or fire. A battleship attempted to turn toward a weaker sector but drifted helplessly into a gravity distortion field created by a hidden Terran ship. Its engines died. Weapons froze. Communication was lost. Panic overtook the crew. Officers shouted orders that could not be obeyed. Engineers smashed consoles in frustration. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing that their arrogance had been fatal. The humans had struck with invisible precision, teaching the invaders that trespass into human space carried consequences far beyond imagination. The alien fleets attempted to regroup. Orders were shouted, engines ignited, and weapons powered up, but the humans anticipated each move. Subtle energy fields disrupted navigation, decoys forced splits in formations, and stealth ships monitored every corridor. Panic spread faster than any signal. Junior officers begged for guidance, but command centers were paralyzed. Every attempt at recovery failed. Ships collided silently in the void, drifting helplessly. Pride turned to shame. Confidence turned to fear. Desperation replaced strategy. Humanity had turned patience, foresight, and discipline into the deadliest weapon in the galaxy. Across the fleet, despair deepened. On one cruiser, the chief engineer whispered, We underestimated them. We thought humans were weak." Pilot shivered as engines failed mid-flight. Another officer wept silently, realizing there was no escape. The invaders had come expecting easy conquest, yet they were now powerless. The humans did not need explosions, did not need chaos, did not need loud destruction. Precision, patience, and moral discipline had shattered an entire fleet before full combat had begun. The first strike had already succeeded. Terran ships moved like silent predators. Corvettes disabled weapons and engines without fire. Larger ships shifted formations to block escape routes. Decoys forced alien vessels to split, isolating them in vulnerable positions. Every move, every adjustment, every subtle interference was calculated. No crew member took unnecessary risk. No civilian or civilian-like vessel was harmed. Humans had prepared for decades, and every step of the alien fleet fell into a trap they could not see, could not understand, and could not escape. Panic and despair had replaced confidence, pride, and arrogance. The alien admirals were paralyzed. One screamed into communication channels that would not respond. Another begged for engineers to restore power, only to find every system failing simultaneously. Junior officers hid in corners, hands trembling, praying silently. The arrogance that had brought them to human space evaporated completely, replaced by the chilling understanding that they had underestimated a species unlike any they had faced. They were no longer invincible. They were no longer untouchable. They were prey to patience, foresight, and intelligence beyond their comprehension. Captain Duran observed calmly from the bridge of the flagship. Maintain formation. Do not overcommit. Observe and anticipate. Only strike when necessary, he reminded his officers. Every ship responded perfectly. Every crew member knew their role. Every subtle interference, Every invisible trap, every calculated movement reinforced the lesson that trespass into human space carried consequences. The humans did not need to boast. They did not need to scream victory. Silence, patience, and precision were already doing the work of war. The alien fleet, once arrogant and untouchable, now drifted helplessly. Engines failed mid-maneuver. Shields collapsed. Weapons misfired. Communications broke down. Panic overtook every officer. Engineers cursed themselves for ever assuming human weakness. Pilots drifted helplessly, screaming into silence. Junior officers wept. Pride, confidence, and arrogance had turned to fear, despair, and humiliation. Humanity's patience and precision had rendered the fleet powerless. They had trespassed into a force they could not hope to challenge. Even distant observers in the galaxy began to notice. Reports of drifting fleets, failing systems, and panicked crews spread quickly. Whispers of fear and awe echoed. Humans are not weak. Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable. Across civilizations, the story was told again and again. Trespass into human space came at a cost no one could endure. The Terran fleet did not destroy recklessly. They did not gloat or overextend. Every subtle move carried intent, moral clarity, and precision that left the enemy broken before real combat had begun. The aliens' desperation reached its peak. Commanders tried to retreat. Junior officers cried as engines failed. Weapons refused to fire. Shields collapsed. Engineers smashed consoles. Pilots screamed silently into the void. The humans had anticipated every possible action, every possible maneuver, every contingency. Every failure of the alien fleet was deliberate, controlled, and orchestrated by minds trained for decades. Their arrogance, their confidence, their trespass had led to inevitable defeat. As Terran ships glided silently across the void, Captain Duran issued the final calm command. Monitor all sectors. Maintain formation. Observe. Strike only when necessary. Patience wins where arrogance fails. Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood. Humanity did not need destruction to dominate. They only needed foresight, patience, precision, and moral discipline. Already, before full combat had erupted, the aliens were defeated in every way that mattered. Morale shattered, cohesion destroyed, pride humiliated, and fear consuming every crew. The galaxy would remember this moment. Not as a battle of explosions, not as a massacre, not as a spectacle of chaos. Humanity had taught a lesson. Trespass, arrogance, and underestimation were fatal mistakes. Precision, foresight, patience, and moral discipline were deadlier than any weapon. The aliens had learned too late. The Terran fleet had deployed, and those who believed themselves untouchable were already falling. Silence, patience, and moral control had destroyed them long before fire and fury could ever be necessary. Humanity had proven itself unstoppable, disciplined, and supreme in ways the galaxy had never seen. The alien fleets were now in full collapse. Ships that had entered human space with arrogance and confidence were drifting helplessly. Engines dead, weapons frozen, shields flickering weakly. Every officer and pilot felt the weight of despair pressing on them, a weight that no training or experience could relieve. They had believed themselves untouchable, that the humans would respond slowly, scattered, unprepared. They were wrong. Every mistake they had made, every assumption about human weakness, had been calculated, anticipated, and turned against them with precision and silence. On the bridge of a massive alien dreadnought, the Admiral's hands shook as he clutched the railing. We were supposed to be the strongest. How is this possible? His voice trembled as he looked at the failing screens, at ships spinning helplessly, at engineers slamming consoles that no longer obeyed. Junior officers hid in corners, hands shaking, whispering prayers to gods they had long forgotten. They were trained for war, but this was not war. This was something beyond their understanding. Patience, foresight, discipline, and moral precision had become a weapon stronger than lasers, missiles, or fleets. Across the void, Terran corvettes slipped through blind spots with ghost-like precision. A single pulse from one disabled the engines of a cruiser, leaving it helpless. Another vessel created a phantom threat, forcing an alien battleship to split from its formation. Decoys manipulated enemy movements like a puppeteer with invisible strings. The humans had not yet fired a single shot directly, and yet the alien fleets were breaking apart, drifting into positions that left them exposed, isolated, and humiliated. Every subtle action carried weight. Every invisible move taught a lesson. Trespass into human space would be met with consequences far beyond imagination. Captain Elias Duran observed the battlefield from the flagship's bridge. Calm, composed, eyes scanning every system, every anomaly, every failing ship. Maintain formation. Monitor all sectors. Observe and anticipate. Engage only when necessary, he said, voice steady and deliberate. His crew moved as one organism, seamlessly, flawlessly. Every officer knew their role, every engineer their tasks, every pilot their maneuvers. They did not need chaos to win. They did not need fire. They only needed patience, precision, and foresight. Already, the alien fleets were paying the price for arrogance and underestimation. The aliens attempted desperate maneuvers. Engines roared to life, weapons powered up, shields flickered in hope. Orders were shouted, panic creeping into every syllable. Pilots tried to regain control, engineers frantically tried to repair systems, commanders demanded answers. But the humans had anticipated every move, every possible tactic, every desperate attempt. Invisible snares pulled ships off course, stealth corvettes disabled engines, decoys forced splits in formations. Panic spread faster than any weapon. The arrogance of centuries was collapsing, replaced by fear and despair, and no one could stop it. On one alien vessel, a young pilot screamed silently as their thrusters failed mid-maneuver. The ship spun helplessly into the void, weapons frozen, shields dead. Junior officers covered their eyes, realizing that training and technology could not save them. Engineers cursed themselves for assuming humans were predictable. Commanders stared at screens they could not control, hearts pounding in helplessness. Across the fleet, every officer whispered the same words. We underestimated them. We underestimated humans. Pride had been destroyed. Arrogance shattered. Confidence replaced with terror. Humanity had struck without fire, without chaos, and yet the impact was total. Terran ships continued their ghost-like maneuvers. Corvettes disabled weapons and engines without alerting crews. Larger vessels moved into positions to block escape routes. Decoys forced alien ships into isolation. Every subtle move, every interference, every precise action was deliberate, moral, and deadly. The humans had prepared for decades. Every step of the alien fleet fell into traps invisible, calculated, and inevitable. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. Humanity had weaponized patience, foresight, and moral discipline, teaching the invaders that trespass carried consequences far beyond imagination. Across the alien fleets, fear became despair, despair became helplessness. Officers screamed orders that could not be obeyed. Engineers cried quietly, realizing their technology had been outmatched by intelligence and foresight. Pilots drifted helplessly, weapons frozen, engines dead. Every assumption about human weakness was shattered. The invaders had trespassed into territory they could not challenge, and every subtle human maneuver reinforced the lesson. Precision, patience, and moral discipline were deadlier than lasers, missiles, or fleets. Every moment of hesitation, every failed attempt to regroup, reminded the aliens that they had made a fatal mistake. Captain Duran watched silently, calm, observing every movement. Hold position, maintain formation, observe. Only strike when necessary. Let patience guide us, he instructed. Every crew member understood the weight of restraint. They had not come to destroy recklessly. They had come to protect their home and teach the galaxy a lesson. Every subtle disruption, every calculated interference, every invisible trap was a demonstration that humans did not need chaos to dominate. They only needed foresight, patience, and moral control. The alien fleets drifted helplessly. Engines sputtered, weapons froze, shields flickered and collapsed. Officers shouted into silence. Pilots screamed silently as ships spun helplessly. Engineers smashed consoles in desperation. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing there was no escape, no recovery, no hope. The humans had struck not with rage, not with chaos, but with intelligence, patience, and moral discipline. Every failure, every drifting vessel, every frozen weapon was a lesson in consequences, a lesson in humility, and a lesson in fear. Observers in the galaxy watched in awe. Reports of fleets failing without fire spread quickly. Ships drifting helplessly, engines dead, weapons frozen, crews panicking. Whispers echoed across civilizations. Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable. Trespassers learned quickly that arrogance, underestimation, and pride had no place in human space. The Terran fleet had struck silently, invisibly, morally, and lethally. Before the first conventional battle began, the aliens were already broken, humiliated, and afraid. The alien admiral, trembling, attempted a last-ditch order. Regroup, retreat, restore power. His voice broke as he realized nothing could be done. Ships would not respond. Engines refused. Weapons remained paralyzed. Crew members were helpless. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. The humans had anticipated every move, every contingency, every possible action. Every failure of the alien fleet had been orchestrated by minds prepared for decades. Arrogance had led to inevitable defeat. Terran ships glided silently across the void, precise, disciplined, and morally resolute. Captain Duran issued the final calm command. Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Let patience win. Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood. Humanity did not need chaos to dominate. They only needed foresight, precision, patience, and moral clarity. Already, before full engagement, the aliens were defeated in every meaningful way. Morale shattered, formations broken, pride humiliated, fear consuming every heart. The galaxy would remember this moment, not as a battle of fire and destruction, but as the day humanity demonstrated that patience, intelligence, and moral discipline were deadlier than weapons. The aliens had trespassed. They had underestimated. They had ignored centuries of warnings. And now every crew, every ship, every command would feel the consequences. Humanity had proven that power without discipline is useless, arrogance without foresight is fatal, and patience with moral control is unstoppable. The Terran fleet had won, even before the first shot had truly been fired, and the lessons of patience, precision, and moral clarity would echo across the stars forever. The alien fleets were fractured, scattered, and broken. Ships that had once moved with confidence now drifted helplessly, engines dead, weapons frozen, and shields flickering weakly. Officers shouted orders into voids that would not respond. Junior pilots screamed as thrusters failed mid-maneuver. Engineers pounded consoles that refused to obey. The invaders had trespassed into human space, confident in their strength, arrogant in their assumption that Earth's defenses were weak, scattered, and unprepared. And now they were learning the terrifying truth. Humans were precise, patient, disciplined, and unstoppable. On one alien dreadnought, the admiral clutched the railing, eyes wide with disbelief. How is this possible? He whispered, voice trembling. Around him, crew members wept quietly, realizing that their technology, training, and arrogance were no match for human foresight and discipline. The junior officers prayed silently, wishing for escape from the chaos that had no escape. Engineers cursed themselves, their pride shattered, as engines failed, weapons locked, and shields collapsed in critical moments. Humanity had turned patience, precision, and moral clarity into a weapon stronger than lasers, missiles, or fleets. Every subtle action, every invisible maneuver, every careful calculation was lethal. Across the void, Terran corvettes slipped silently into blind spots. A single electromagnetic pulse from one disabled an entire squadron of alien cruisers, leaving them helpless. Another corvette created a phantom threat, forcing enemy vessels to split from formations and drift into traps. Invisible snares, subtle interference fields, and perfectly timed maneuvers kept alien fleets unbalanced, vulnerable, and panicked. The humans had not yet fired a shot directly, and yet the invaders were already broken. Every failure, every drifting ship, every frozen weapon was a lesson in humility, discipline, and fear. Captain Elias Duran observed the chaos calmly from the bridge of the flagship. His eyes scanned every display, every anomaly, every alien ship drifting helplessly. Monitor all sectors, maintain formation, observe and anticipate. Engage only when necessary, he said, voice steady and deliberate. His crew responded seamlessly, flawlessly. Every officer knew their role, every pilot every maneuver, every engineer every subtle interference. The humans did not need to rush, did not need chaos, did not need destruction. Precision, foresight, and moral control were already winning the battle before a single laser was fired. The aliens tried to regroup. Orders were shouted, engines ignited, weapons powered up, shields flickered weakly. Panic rose with every failed attempt. Pilots spun helplessly through the void, engines dying mid-flight. Engineers slammed consoles that would not respond. Commanders screamed into silence, watching their fleets crumble. Pride turned to shame, arrogance into fear. They had underestimated humans, trespassed into human space, and assumed Earth was weak. Every assumption was wrong, every belief shattered. Humanity's patience, foresight, and discipline were the deadliest weapons in the galaxy. On a smaller alien vessel, a young officer trembled as their weapons froze mid-charge. Engines sputtered, shields failed, and communication was lost. Around him, crew members whispered desperate prayers. Panic and despair spread like a disease through the fleet. Officers screamed orders that could not be obeyed. Engineers wept quietly, realizing the futility of their efforts. Pilots drifted helplessly, drifting toward invisible traps set by Terran ships. The humans had taught a brutal, precise lesson. Arrogance, trespass, and underestimation carried consequences beyond imagination. The Terran fleet moved with ghost-like precision. Corvettes disrupted engines, stealth ships monitored blind spots, larger vessels blocked escape routes, and decoys forced alien ships into isolation. Every move was calculated, every subtle interference lethal, every action deliberate and morally precise. The humans had prepared for centuries. The alien fleets had walked blindly into traps they could not see, could not comprehend, and could not escape. Fear and despair dominated every vessel, every officer, every crew member. Humanity had weaponized patience, foresight, and moral discipline into unstoppable force. Across distant observation posts, alien civilizations watched in awe and disbelief. Reports of drifting fleets, failing engines, frozen weapons, and panicked crews spread quickly. Whispers echoed, "Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable." Trespassers learned quickly that arrogance, pride, and underestimation were fatal mistakes. The Terran fleet had struck silently, invisibly, morally, and lethally. Before a single direct battle began, the alien fleets were already broken, humiliated, and terrified. The alien admirals were paralyzed. One tried to give a last-ditch command. Regroup, retreat, restore power. His voice broke as he realized nothing could be done. Engines refused, weapons locked, communications dead. Crew members were helpless. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. The humans had anticipated every possible maneuver, every contingency, every desperate attempt. Every failure of the alien fleet had been orchestrated with foresight, precision, and discipline. Arrogance led to inevitable defeat. Terran ships glided silently across the void, calm, disciplined, and morally resolute. Captain Duran's voice cut through the bridge. Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Let patience win. Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood the importance of restraint. Humans did not need destruction to dominate. They only needed foresight, patience, precision, and moral clarity. Already, before full engagement, the aliens were defeated in every meaningful way. Morale shattered, formations broken, pride humiliated, fear consuming every heart. Across the alien fleets, despair deepened. Engines sputtered, shields collapsed, weapons froze, communication failed. Officers shouted into silence. Pilots screamed silently as ships drifted helplessly. Engineers smashed consoles. Junior officers wept quietly. Humanity had struck not with explosions, not with chaos, not with brute force, but with intelligence, foresight, patience, and moral precision. Every drifting vessel, every frozen weapon, every failing system was a lesson. Arrogance, trespass, and underestimation of humanity were fatal. The galaxy watched silently. Civilizations whispered in fear and awe. Humans are unstoppable. Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Trespassers realized their arrogance was their undoing. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, morally, lethally. The aliens were broken, humiliated, and afraid. Patience, foresight, and moral control had destroyed them before conventional battle had even begun. Humanity had proven itself unstoppable, disciplined, and supreme in ways the galaxy had never seen. And still, Captain Duran's calm voice guided his fleet. Monitor, maintain, anticipate, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. Every officer, every pilot, every engineer understood. The humans had not yet unleashed their full power, yet the first engagement had already shattered fleets, humiliated enemies, and taught the galaxy that trespass into human space had consequences beyond imagination. Arrogance, pride, and underestimation had failed. Humanity's discipline, patience, and foresight had won, and the lesson would echo through the stars forever. The alien fleets were in complete disarray. Ships that had once carried the pride of their civilizations now drifted helplessly through human-controlled space. Engines sputtered and failed mid-maneuver. Weapons froze, shields flickered weakly, and communications fell silent. Officers screamed orders into voids that would not respond. Junior pilots wept quietly as their thrusters failed, leaving them at the mercy of invisible forces. Engineers smashed consoles, cursing their arrogance and disbelief. The invaders had trespassed into human space with confidence, believing in their strength. Yet now they faced a reality they could not comprehend. Humanity was patient, precise, disciplined, and unstoppable. On one massive alien dreadnought, the admiral's hands trembled as he gripped the railing. We cannot control them. This is impossible, he whispered, voice breaking under the weight of shame and fear. Around him, officers and engineers struggled to maintain composure. Junior officers hid in corners, shaking, praying to gods they had long abandoned. Pilots drifted helplessly as their ships became little more than targets in invisible traps. They realized too late that arrogance and trespass had consequences far beyond what they had imagined. The humans did not rush, did not shout, did not panic. Terran corvettes moved silently through blind spots, disrupting engines and weapon systems with precision electromagnetic pulses. Stealth ships monitored every sector, observing every maneuver, every desperate attempt to regain formation. Larger Terran vessels blocked escape routes, while decoys manipulated alien movements, forcing ships into isolation and vulnerability. The humans had not yet fired a direct shot, yet the enemy fleets were breaking apart, drifting helplessly, humiliated, and terrified. Every subtle move, every calculated interference, every deliberate delay was lethal in its precision. Captain Elias Duran watched the battlefield calmly from the bridge of the flagship. His voice was steady, deliberate, and calm. Maintain formation, monitor all sectors, observe and anticipate, Engage only when necessary. His crew responded flawlessly, moving as one organism. Every pilot, engineer, and officer knew their role. They did not need chaos to win. They did not need fire or destruction. Every subtle disruption, every invisible trap, every calculated maneuver was a demonstration of humanity's moral discipline and intelligence. Already, the alien fleets were paying for their trespass, and every moment increased despair and humiliation. The aliens attempted to regroup. Engines roared, weapons charged, shields flickered to life, but the humans anticipated each desperate maneuver. Subtle interference fields disabled engines mid-flight. Decoys forced vessels apart, creating isolation and vulnerability. Pilots tried to regain control. Engineers frantically attempted repairs. Commanders shouted futile orders. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Arrogance turned to fear, pride to shame, confidence to despair. Humanity had transformed patience, foresight, and moral discipline into a weapon stronger than any laser or missile. Every failure of the alien fleet was a lesson in humility and terror. On one smaller vessel, a young officer screamed silently as weapons failed mid-charge and engines sputtered. Around him, crew members whispered desperate prayers. Panic became despair. Despair became helplessness. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing that training, experience, and technology were powerless against humans' patience and precision. Pride had shattered. Arrogance dissolved. Every assumption about human weakness was false. Every mistake made by the aliens had been anticipated. The humans had weaponized intelligence, foresight, and discipline, turning them into unstoppable forces that crushed the invaders before full combat had even begun. Terran ships moved like silent predators across the void. Corvettes disrupted weapons and engines without warning. Stealth vessels appeared in blind spots, monitoring and disabling. Larger ships blocked escape routes. Decoys forced alien ships into vulnerable positions. Every move was deliberate, calculated, and morally precise. Humanity had prepared for centuries. Every alien ship that drifted helplessly, every failing weapon, every frozen shield was a testament to foresight, patience, and discipline. Panic spread across fleets, and morale collapsed under invisible, silent pressure. Observers across the galaxy watched in awe. Reports of drifting ships, failed engines, frozen weapons, and panicked crews spread quickly. Whispers echoed across civilizations. Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable. Trespassers learned a lesson that arrogance and underestimation could be fatal. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, silently, morally, and lethally. Even before conventional battle had begun, the alien fleets were already broken, humiliated, and terrified. The alien admirals were paralyzed with fear. One attempted a last-ditch command: regroup, retreat, restore power. His voice broke as he realized nothing could be done. Engines would not respond. Weapons remained paralyzed. Communications were dead. Crew members were helpless. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. The humans had anticipated every possible action, every contingency, every maneuver. Every failure of the alien fleet was orchestrated with precision, foresight, and discipline. Arrogance had led to inevitable defeat. Terran ships glided silently, calm, disciplined, and morally resolute. Captain Duran issued a final, steady command: observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Let patience guide us. Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood. Humanity did not need chaos or fire to dominate. They only needed foresight, patience, precision, and moral control. Even before full engagement, the alien fleets were defeated in every meaningful way. Morale shattered, formations broken, pride humiliated, fear consuming every heart. The alien crews were collapsing emotionally. Engines failed. Weapons froze. Shields flickered. Officers shouted into silence. Pilots drifted helplessly. Engineers smashed consoles in frustration. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing there was no escape, no recovery, no hope. Humanity had struck not with chaos, not with fire, but with intelligence, foresight, patience, and moral clarity. Every frozen weapon, every drifting ship, every failing system was a lesson in consequences, a lesson in humility, and a lesson in terror. Across the galaxy, distant civilizations whispered in awe and fear. Humans are unstoppable. Humans are disciplined. Humans are precise. Trespassers realized their arrogance had been their undoing. The Terran fleet had struck silently, morally, lethally. Alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. Patience, foresight, and moral discipline had destroyed them before conventional battle had begun. Humanity had proven itself unstoppable, disciplined, and supreme in ways no species had ever imagined. Even now, Captain Duran's voice guided the fleet. Monitor all sectors, maintain formation, anticipate, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. Every crew member understood. The humans had not unleashed their full power, yet the first engagement had already shattered fleets, humiliated enemies, and taught the galaxy that trespass into human space carried consequences beyond imagination. Arrogance, pride, and underestimation had failed. Humanity's discipline, foresight, and patience had won. The lesson would echo across the stars forever. The alien fleets were collapsing faster than anyone had imagined. Ships that had once moved with arrogance and pride now drifted helplessly, engines sputtering, weapons frozen, shields flickering weakly. The air, or the void, as they knew it, was filled with silent panic. Officers screamed orders into empty consoles, engines failed mid-maneuver, and shields flickered helplessly as invisible human forces controlled every aspect of the battlefield. Every fleet that had entered human space with confidence now found itself powerless. Humanity had anticipated every step, every tactic, every desperate attempt at recovery. The aliens had walked blindly into a trap they could not see, could not comprehend, and could not escape. On one massive cruiser, the Admiral gripped the railing with hands shaking. "Impossible! This cannot be happening. We were supposed to be untouchable," he whispered, eyes wide with terror. Around him, officers covered their faces, realizing their pride and arrogance had been destroyed in moments. Engineers slammed consoles, attempting to restore engines and weapons, only to find that their systems would not respond. Junior officers sat trembling, praying silently, their confidence evaporated. Pilots drifted helplessly as ships spun slowly into traps invisible to their eyes. Every assumption about human weakness, every belief in their own superiority had been proven fatal. Terran corvettes moved with ghost-like precision, slipping silently through blind spots. One vessel emitted a subtle pulse, disabling engines across an entire squadron of alien cruisers. Another created a phantom threat, forcing alien ships to split from formations, drifting helplessly into isolation. Larger Terran vessels blocked escape routes, while decoys manipulated enemy movements. Every action was deliberate, every interference precise, every trap invisible yet fatal. Humanity had weaponized patience, foresight, and moral discipline into instruments of unstoppable force. Even before full combat had begun, alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. Captain Elias Duran watched the battlefield calmly from the flagship's bridge. His eyes scanned every display, every anomaly, every alien vessel spinning helplessly. Maintain formation, observe all sectors, anticipate every move. Engage only when necessary, he said, voice calm and unwavering. His crew responded flawlessly, moving as one organism. Every engineer, officer, and pilot knew their role. They did not need fire or chaos. Every subtle disruption, every invisible interference, every precise maneuver was a testament to human intelligence and moral discipline. Already, the invaders were paying the price for trespass, arrogance, and underestimation. The aliens attempted desperate recovery. Engines roared, weapons powered up, shields flickered weakly to life. Officers shouted orders, Pilots tried to regain control. Engineers worked frantically. But the humans anticipated every move, every possible contingency, every desperate attempt at escape. Decoys split formations. Stealth ships disabled engines silently. Larger vessels blocked retreat. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Pride turned to shame. Confidence turned to fear. Humanity had turned foresight, patience, and moral precision into weapons deadlier than lasers or missiles. Every failure of the alien fleet was a lesson in humility, terror, and despair. On one isolated ship, a young officer's hands shook as engines sputtered, weapons failed, and shields collapsed. Junior crew members wept quietly. Pilots drifted helplessly as invisible forces guided them toward traps. Engineers cursed themselves and their technology, realizing their arrogance had blinded them to human capability. The humans had not needed to unleash destruction to dominate. Every subtle move, every invisible interference, every calculated pause was already inflicting total defeat. Pride, arrogance, and confidence had been destroyed. Fear, despair, and humiliation now reigned across the fleets. Terran ships moved like predators across the void. Corvettes disrupted weapons and engines without warning. Stealth ships monitored blind spots, ensuring no maneuver went unobserved. Larger vessels blocked escape routes. Decoys forced ships into vulnerability. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and morally controlled. Humanity had prepared for centuries. Every drifting vessel, every frozen weapon, every failing system was proof that patience, discipline, and moral clarity were deadlier than any weapon in the galaxy. Panic consumed the alien crews. Morale collapsed under the invisible, silent pressure of human strategy. Across the galaxy, observers watched in awe. Reports of drifting fleets, frozen weapons, failing engines, and panicked crews spread rapidly. Civilizations whispered, "Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable." Trespassers learned quickly that arrogance and underestimation had consequences far beyond imagination. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, silently, morally, and lethally. Alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified even before direct battle began. Admirals were paralyzed. One attempted a last-ditch command: "Regroup, retreat, restore systems." His voice cracked with desperation. Nothing could be done. Engines refused. Weapons remained frozen. Communications were dead. Crew members were helpless. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. Humans had anticipated every contingency, every maneuver, every desperate attempt. Every failure of the alien fleet was orchestrated with foresight, discipline, and moral precision. Arrogance had led to inevitable defeat. Terran ships glided silently across the void, calm, disciplined, morally resolute. Captain Duran issued a steady command: "Monitor all sectors. Maintain formation. Observe and anticipate. Strike only when necessary. Let patience guide us." Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood. Humanity did not need chaos or fire to dominate. Foresight, patience, precision, and moral clarity were more than enough. Before full engagement, alien fleets were already defeated. Morale shattered, formations broken, pride humiliated, fear consuming every heart. Alien crews collapsed emotionally. Engines sputtered. Weapons froze. Shields failed. Officers shouted into silence. Pilots drifted helplessly. Engineers smashed consoles in frustration. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing there was no escape, no hope, no recovery. Humanity had struck not with chaos or fire, but with foresight, patience, intelligence, and moral precision. Every drifting ship, frozen weapon, and failing system was a lesson. Trespass and arrogance were fatal. Across the galaxy, distant civilizations whispered in fear and awe, "Humans are unstoppable. Humans are disciplined. Humans are precise." Trespassers realized their arrogance had doomed them. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, morally, lethally. Alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. Patience, foresight, and moral discipline had won before conventional battle had even begun. Humanity had proven it was supreme, disciplined, and unstoppable. And still, Captain Duran's voice guided his fleet. Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. Every crew member understood. Humans had not unleashed their full power, yet the first engagement had already shattered fleets, humiliated enemies, and taught the galaxy that trespass into human space carried consequences beyond imagination. Arrogance, pride, and underestimation had failed. Humanity's discipline, foresight, and patience had won. The lesson would echo across the stars forever. The alien fleets were in full collapse. Every ship that had once carried the pride of its civilization now drifted helplessly, engines sputtering, weapons frozen, shields flickering weakly. Officers shouted orders that went unheard. Pilots spun helplessly through the void, engines dying mid-maneuver, weapons locked in failure. Engineers smashed consoles in frustration, realizing their technology could not overcome human strategy. The aliens had trespassed into human space, confident in their strength, believing the Terran fleet would be slow, scattered, and weak. They had been wrong. Humanity's patience, foresight, and moral discipline were weapons stronger than any laser, missile, or warship. Every subtle human move, every invisible interference, every calculated delay had shattered the invaders before conventional battle had even begun. On one massive alien dreadnought, the admiral gripped the railing with shaking hands. His voice was barely a whisper. How can they? Around him, officers covered their faces. Engineers pounded consoles. Junior officers wept quietly. Pilots drifted helplessly, trapped by invisible snares. Pride had turned to shame. Confidence had turned to terror. Arrogance had been destroyed. Every assumption the aliens had made about human weakness had been proven fatal. Every step they had taken into human space had been anticipated, countered, and exploited. Humanity had weaponized intelligence, foresight, and discipline into a force unstoppable, invisible, and morally precise. Terran corvettes moved like shadows, slipping silently into blind spots. One emitted a pulse that disabled engines across a fleet of alien cruisers. Another created a phantom threat, forcing alien vessels to split from formation and drift into isolation. Larger Terran ships blocked retreat. Decoys manipulated enemy maneuvers. Every subtle disruption, every invisible interference, every patient observation inflicted humiliation, despair, and fear. The humans had not yet fired direct weapons, and yet the alien fleets were broken. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Pride turned to fear, arrogance to shame, confidence to despair. Humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson no species would forget. Trespass and underestimation carried consequences beyond imagination. Captain Elias Duran observed calmly from the bridge of the flagship. His eyes scanned every display, every anomaly, every drifting alien vessel. Maintain formation, monitor all sectors, anticipate every move. Engage only when necessary. He instructed, voice steady, deliberate, and calm. His crew responded seamlessly, moving as one organism. Every officer, pilot, and engineer knew their role. Chaos was unnecessary. Destruction was optional. Every invisible maneuver, every subtle interference, every calculated pause demonstrated humanity's superiority. Already, alien fleets were paying the price for trespass, arrogance, and underestimation. The aliens attempted desperate recovery. Engines roared, weapons powered up, shields flickered weakly. Officers shouted, pilots maneuvered frantically, engineers hammered consoles. But the humans anticipated each step, each contingency, each desperate attempt to escape. Decoys forced formations apart. Stealth ships disabled engines silently. Larger vessels blocked retreat. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Confidence dissolved into fear. Pride became shame. Humanity had turned patience, foresight, and moral discipline into weapons deadlier than lasers or missiles. Every failure of the alien fleet was a lesson in terror, humility, and despair. On one isolated vessel, a young officer's hands shook as engines sputtered, weapons froze, and shields collapsed. Crew members whispered desperate prayers. Pilots drifted helplessly, guided by invisible forces into traps. Engineers cursed themselves, realizing that arrogance had blinded them to human capability. The humans had not yet unleashed fire or chaos. Every subtle maneuver, every invisible interference, every calculated action was already inflicting total defeat. Pride, arrogance, and confidence had been destroyed. Fear, despair, and humiliation dominated alien fleets. Terran ships moved like predators. Corvettes disrupted weapons and engines without warning. Stealth ships monitored blind spots, ensuring no maneuver went unobserved. Larger vessels blocked escape routes. Decoys forced alien ships into vulnerability. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and morally guided. Humanity had prepared for centuries. Every drifting vessel, every frozen weapon, every failing system proved that patience, discipline, and moral clarity were deadlier than any technology. Panic consumed the alien crews. Morale collapsed under silent, invisible pressure. Across the galaxy, observers watched in awe. Reports of drifting fleets, frozen weapons, failing engines, and panicked crews spread like wildfire. Civilizations whispered in fear, "Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable." Trespassers learned quickly. Arrogance, trespass, and underestimation were fatal mistakes. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, silently, morally, lethally. Even before conventional battle began, alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. Admirals were paralyzed. One attempted a last-ditch command: "Regroup, retreat, restore systems." His voice cracked with desperation. Nothing could be done. Engines refused. Weapons remained frozen. Communications were dead. Crew members were helpless. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. Humans had anticipated every contingency, every maneuver, every desperate act. Every failure of the alien fleet was orchestrated with foresight, precision, and moral clarity. Arrogance had led to inevitable defeat. Terran ships glided silently, calm, disciplined, morally resolute. Captain Terran issued a final command: "Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined." Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood. Humans did not need chaos or fire to dominate. Foresight, patience, precision, and moral clarity were enough. Before full engagement, alien fleets were already defeated. Morale shattered, formations broken, pride humiliated, fear consuming every heart. Alien crews collapsed emotionally. Engines sputtered, weapons froze, shields failed. Officers shouted into silence. Pilots drifted helplessly. Engineers smashed consoles. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing there was no escape, no hope, no recovery. Humanity had struck not with chaos or fire, but with foresight, patience, intelligence, and moral precision. Every drifting ship, frozen weapon, and failing system was a lesson. Trespass and arrogance were fatal. Across the galaxy, distant civilizations whispered in fear and awe, "Humans are unstoppable. Humans are disciplined. Humans are precise." Trespassers realized their arrogance had doomed them. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, morally, lethally. Alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. Patience, foresight, and moral discipline had won before conventional battle had begun. Humanity had proven it was supreme, disciplined, and unstoppable. Even now, Captain Terran's voice guided the fleet. "Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined." Every crew member understood. Humans had not unleashed their full power, Yet the first engagement had already shattered fleets, humiliated enemies, and taught the galaxy that trespass into human space carried consequences beyond imagination. Arrogance, pride, and underestimation had failed. Humanity's discipline, foresight, and patience had won. The lesson would echo across the stars forever. The alien fleets were in ruins. Ships that had once been symbols of pride now floated helplessly, engines sputtering, weapons frozen, shields flickering weakly. Officers screamed into empty communication channels, commands lost in the void. Pilots spun helplessly, drifting toward invisible traps. Engineers pounded their consoles, cursing their arrogance and disbelief. They had trespassed into human space with confidence, convinced that the Terran fleet would be slow, scattered, and weak. They had been catastrophically wrong. Humanity's patience, foresight, and moral discipline had become weapons more deadly than any laser, missile, or warship. Every subtle movement, every invisible interference, every calculated pause had shattered the invaders long before conventional battle began. On one massive dreadnought, the alien admiral gripped the railing, hands trembling. This is impossible," he whispered, eyes wide with terror. Around him, officers hid their faces. Engineers slammed consoles, attempting in vain to revive engines and weapons. Junior officers wept quietly. Pilots drifted helplessly into traps they could not see. Pride had turned to shame. Confidence had turned to terror. Every assumption about human weakness had been proven fatally wrong. Humanity had weaponized intelligence, foresight, and discipline into a force that no one could oppose. The first engagement had been a silent, invisible massacre, a lesson in humility and fear that would echo across the galaxy. Terran corvettes moved like shadows through blind spots. One ship emitted a subtle electromagnetic pulse that disabled engines across a fleet of alien cruisers. Another created a phantom threat, forcing enemy vessels to split formations and drift into isolation. Larger Terran ships blocked escape routes, while decoys manipulated enemy movements, herding them like prey. Every move was deliberate, precise, morally guided. Humans had not even unleashed fire or destruction. They did not need to. The invaders were already defeated. Panic spread like wildfire. Pride turned to fear, arrogance into shame, and confidence dissolved into despair. Humanity had demonstrated that foresight, patience, and moral discipline could conquer fleets without a single full-scale battle. Captain Elias Duran watched the battlefield from the flagship's bridge. His eyes scanned every display, every anomaly, every drifting alien vessel. Maintain formation, observe all sectors, anticipate every move. Engage only when necessary, he instructed calmly. His crew moved seamlessly, flawlessly. Engineers, officers, and pilots acted as one organism. Chaos was unnecessary. Destruction was optional. Every invisible maneuver, every subtle interference, every calculated action demonstrated humanity's superiority. Already, the invaders were paying for trespass, arrogance, and underestimation. The aliens made desperate attempts to recover. Engines roared, weapons powered up, shields flickered weakly. Officers shouted orders. Pilots maneuvered frantically. Engineers hammered consoles. But every action had been anticipated. Stealth ships disabled engines silently. Decoys split formations. Larger vessels blocked retreat. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Pride dissolved into fear. Confidence became despair. Humanity had transformed patience, foresight, and moral precision into weapons deadlier than lasers, missiles, or entire fleets. Every failure of the alien forces was orchestrated with precision, planning, and discipline. Arrogance had led to inevitable defeat. On one isolated vessel, a young officer's hands shook as engines sputtered, weapons failed, and shields collapsed. Crew members whispered desperate prayers. Pilots drifted helplessly, guided by invisible forces into traps. Engineers cursed themselves, realizing that arrogance had blinded them to human capability. Humans had not needed to unleash fire or chaos. Every subtle maneuver, every invisible interference, Every calculated action inflicted total defeat. Pride, arrogance, and confidence were destroyed. Fear, despair, and humiliation dominated alien fleets. Terran ships moved like predators across the void. Corvettes disrupted weapons and engines without warning. Stealth ships monitored blind spots, ensuring no maneuver went unobserved. Larger vessels blocked escape routes. Decoys forced alien ships into vulnerability. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and morally guided. Humanity had prepared for centuries. Every drifting vessel, every frozen weapon, every failing system proved that patience, discipline, and moral clarity were deadlier than any technology. Panic consumed alien crews. Morale collapsed under invisible, silent pressure. Across the galaxy, observers watched in awe. Reports of drifting fleets, frozen weapons, failing engines, and panicked crews spread rapidly. Civilizations whispered in fear and astonishment. Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable. Trespassers learned quickly. Arrogance, trespass, and underestimation were fatal mistakes. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, silently, morally, lethally. Even before conventional battle began, alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. Admirals were paralyzed. One attempted a last-ditch command: regroup, retreat, restore systems. His voice cracked with desperation. Nothing could be done. Engines refused. Weapons remained frozen. Communications were dead. Crew members were helpless. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. Humans had anticipated every contingency, every maneuver, every desperate act. Every failure of the alien fleet was orchestrated with foresight, precision, and moral clarity. Arrogance had led to inevitable defeat. Terran ships glided silently, calm, disciplined, and morally resolute. Captain Duran issued a final command: observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood. Humanity did not need chaos or fire to dominate. Foresight, patience, precision, and moral clarity were enough. Before full engagement, alien fleets were already defeated. Morale shattered, formations broken, pride humiliated, fear consuming every heart. Alien crews collapsed emotionally. Engines sputtered. Weapons froze. Shields failed. Officers shouted into silence. Pilots drifted helplessly. Engineers smashed consoles. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing there was no escape, no hope, no recovery. Humanity had struck not with chaos or fire, but with foresight, patience, intelligence, and moral precision. Every drifting ship, frozen weapon, and failing system was a lesson. Trespass and arrogance were fatal. Across the galaxy, distant civilizations whispered in fear and awe. Humans are unstoppable. Humans are disciplined. Humans are precise. Trespassers realized their arrogance had doomed them. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, morally, lethally. Alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. Patience, foresight, and moral discipline had won before conventional battle had begun. Humanity had proven it was supreme, disciplined, and unstoppable. Even now, Captain Duran's voice guided the fleet. Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. Every crew member understood. Humans had not unleashed their full power, yet the first engagement had already shattered fleets, humiliated enemies, and taught the galaxy that trespass into human space carried consequences beyond imagination. Arrogance, pride, and underestimation had failed. Humanity's discipline, foresight, and patience had won. The lesson would echo across the stars forever. The alien fleets were no longer organized. Ships floated helplessly in the void, their engines dead, weapons frozen, shields flickering like dying stars. Officers screamed futile orders, but no system would obey. Pilots drifted helplessly, staring at the stars they had long believed were theirs to conquer. Engineers pounded consoles, realizing their technology could not overcome human precision, human foresight, human discipline. Their pride, arrogance, and belief in superiority had been shattered. Every alien commander understood, in the deepest, most terrifying way, that humanity was not just powerful, it was unstoppable. Humanity was patient, precise, disciplined, and morally resolute. Humanity was perfection forged into force, and they had trespassed at their own peril. On one massive dreadnought, the alien admiral gripped the railing, hands trembling violently. How is this possible?" he whispered, voice barely audible over the silence of drifting wreckage. Around him, junior officers wept quietly. Engineers slammed consoles in frustration. Pilots stared blankly at controls that refused to respond. Pride had turned to humiliation. Confidence had dissolved into fear. Arrogance had been utterly destroyed. Every assumption about human weakness had been proven fatal. The Terran fleet had anticipated every maneuver, every contingency, every desperate attempt at recovery. Humanity had weaponized patience, foresight, intelligence, and moral discipline into a force that no species could oppose. Captain Elias Duran stood on the bridge of the flagship, calm and resolute. His eyes scanned every drifting enemy vessel, every failing system, every panicked officer. Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. He commanded, voice steady as a mountain. His crew moved flawlessly, every engineer, officer, and pilot performing as one organism. There was no chaos. There was no panic. There was only precision. Humanity did not need fire or destruction. Every subtle maneuver, every invisible interference, every calculated delay was enough. Already, alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified. The aliens made one final attempt at resistance. Engines roared weakly, weapons sputtered, shields flickered back to life. Officers shouted orders, pilots maneuvered frantically, engineers hammered consoles. But the humans had anticipated it all. Stealth ships moved silently, disabling engines and weapons. Decoys forced alien formations apart, isolating ships into vulnerability. Larger Terran vessels blocked retreat, herding the enemies like prey. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Confidence dissolved. Pride became despair. Arrogance had failed. Humanity had turned patience, foresight, and moral discipline into weapons deadlier than lasers, missiles, or fleets. Every failure of the alien forces was orchestrated with precision and moral clarity. On one isolated vessel, a young officer's hands shook as engines sputtered, weapons froze, and shields collapsed. Crew members whispered desperate prayers. Pilots drifted helplessly, guided by invisible human forces into traps they could not see. Engineers cursed themselves, realizing that arrogance had blinded them to human capability. Humanity had not needed to unleash fire, chaos, or destruction. Every subtle maneuver, every invisible interference, every calculated action inflicted total defeat. Pride, arrogance, and confidence had been destroyed. Fear, despair, and humiliation dominated the alien fleets. Terran ships moved like predators through the void. Corvettes disrupted weapons and engines without warning. Stealth ships monitored blind spots, ensuring no alien maneuver went unobserved. Larger vessels blocked escape routes. Decoys manipulated alien fleets into vulnerability. Every action was deliberate, precise, and morally guided. Humanity had prepared for centuries. Every drifting vessel, every frozen weapon, every failing system proved that patience, discipline, and moral clarity were stronger than any technology. Panic consumed the alien crews. Morale collapsed under invisible, silent pressure. Across the galaxy, observers watched in awe. Reports of drifting fleets, frozen weapons, failing engines, and panicked crews spread like wildfire. Civilizations whispered in fear and astonishment. Humans are precise. Humans are disciplined. Humans are unstoppable. Trespassers learned quickly. Arrogance, trespass, and underestimation were fatal mistakes. The Terran fleet had struck invisibly, silently, morally, lethally. Alien fleets were broken, humiliated, and terrified even before direct engagement. Admirals were paralyzed. One attempted a last-ditch command: regroup, retreat, restore systems. His voice cracked with desperation. Nothing could be done. Engines refused. Weapons remained frozen. Communications were dead. Crew members were helpless. Panic and despair consumed every vessel. Humans had anticipated every contingency, every maneuver, every desperate act. Every failure of the alien fleet had been orchestrated with foresight, precision, and moral clarity. Arrogance had led to inevitable defeat. Terran ships glided silently, calm, disciplined, morally resolute. Captain Terran issued a final command: observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. Every officer nodded. Every crew member understood. Humanity did not need chaos or fire to dominate. Foresight, patience, precision, and moral clarity were enough. Alien fleets were already defeated. Morale shattered, formations broken, pride humiliated, fear consuming every heart. Alien crews collapsed emotionally. Engines sputtered. Weapons froze. Shields failed. Officers shouted into silence. Pilots drifted helplessly. Engineers smashed consoles. Junior officers wept quietly, realizing there was no escape, no hope, no recovery. Humanity had struck not with chaos or fire, but with foresight, patience, intelligence, and moral precision. Every drifting ship, frozen weapon, and failing system was a lesson. Trespass and arrogance were fatal. The Terran fleet did not cheer. There was no celebration. The humans were calm, disciplined, and morally resolute. Their victory was silent, precise, complete. Captain Terran's voice guided the fleet. Observe, anticipate, maintain formation, strike only when necessary. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. Every crew member understood. Humans had not unleashed their full power, yet the first engagement had already shattered fleets, humiliated enemies, and taught the galaxy that trespass into human space carried consequences beyond imagination. Arrogance, pride, and underestimation had failed. Humanity's discipline, foresight, and patience had won. Across the void, alien fleets drifted like broken toys, engines dead, weapons frozen, shields failing. Officers whispered apologies. Crews wept. Pilots stared blankly. The lesson had been brutal, moral, and precise. Humanity had defended its space not just with technology, but with patience, foresight, discipline, and moral clarity. They had proven themselves unstoppable, morally and militarily supreme. The galaxy would remember this day forever. Captain Terran looked out at the stars, calm, resolute, unshaken. We do not need destruction to prove our strength. We do not need chaos to enforce our will. We are patient. We are precise. We are disciplined. And we are ready. His crew, silent and disciplined, nodded in understanding. Humanity had triumphed without a single unnecessary casualty. Their strength was intelligence, foresight, patience, and moral clarity. The galaxy would remember the lesson. Trespass against humanity carried consequences far beyond imagination, and arrogance was fatal. Humanity was unstoppable. Humanity was supreme. Humanity was discipline, patience, and moral precision made real. And in the endless silence of space, drifting alien fleets understood finally, completely, and forever. They had underestimated humanity at their peril.